The bishop is still on his way, but actually I was supposed to say a few words to you anyway, so it works out actually just fine. He'll be here in just a couple minutes. He's our keynote speaker for our pastor's luncheon. But I actually did put myself on the agenda to take a hit for all the rest of you who spoke to go after Nick Freitas to give us some last words of action, because we have to end this on action, and that's actually the main point of what we're here to do. I don't think we had to sell you on these candidates. In fact, I am overwhelmingly impressed, not just by our quality of who is trying to serve us, but golly, by the quality of their spouses. You got to hear from Wendy. Nick's wife is phenomenal, and Leanne Benjamin, I mean, you can't beat some of the spouses. So even when you can't hear from the candidate, it's phenomenal. So yeah, I mean, it's, and I'll just tell you, all day long, give me a candidate that actually knows what they believe. Not, I want to run and I'm conservative because I kind of have these ideas. All day long, give me a candidate like Nick that the heart of who he is, and Delegate Cox, that what they believe is going to fuel what they do on issues. It's truly refreshing. And this is an interesting kind of event we have today. Not only are we sort of all working through what events look like in COVID, and we certainly learned a little bit about people being unwilling to come to downtown Richmond, which is a little bit shocking for an organization that's done 1 million events down here for 35 years. We're learning that, we have to take back Virginia, and that's the only way we're going to get our own hometown back of the city of Richmond, which is just shocking. But it's also rare that we do TFF action events. We get to be a little bit more political at these events than our normal educational arm. And so I get to say a few words today that are a little bit more revved up for what we have in front of us. They say every election is important, right? And in fact, they said the last election was the most consequential election of our lifetime. And that really didn't matter what your age was, honestly. People said that. It was the most consequential election. And I would say this, given the fact that we've had 3 Supreme Court nominations under this president, I'd say they were right. Given that it's a lot broader than just Amy Coney Barrett, it's actually an entire revamping of the judiciary, something like 300 seats by the time he leaves, even just the first 4 years, even by the time that stretch is done, I would say they were right. Given that just 3 months into his presidency, this president has allowed states to defund Planned Parenthood in their Title X family planning funds, I'd say they were right. Given that this president, President Trump, has actually reinstated the Mexico City policy that makes sure we're not exporting abortion funds all over the globe, I'd say they were right. Given that this administration now requires health plans to actually admit when they cover abortion, I would say they were right. Given the fact that this president has actually issued an executive order exempting certain organizations like Little Sisters of the Poor from having to pay for abortion and contraceptives, I'd say they were right. And in fact, this last week, President Trump issued an executive order to ensure that every infant born alive immediately receives adequate medical care, especially those that are born prematurely, and we know some that are born from botched abortions. I'd say they were right. And on a whole nother front, given the fact that this administration is responsible for peace deals between Israel and several Middle Eastern countries, I'd say they were right. And this president's been on the right side of the gender privacy battles that are critically important to our young people. I would say they're right. And that list goes on and on. So what's everybody saying about this election this year? Well, that it's the most consequential election of our lifetime. Why is that? Well, let's just take a look at what happens when someone of the opposite ideology comes into power and their ideology wins an accompanying legislature to go with it. Well, we know what that looks like here in Virginia. We know exactly what that looks like. Here it started with liberals capturing a few seats here and there. Then they captured some governorships. And then came the blue wave of 2019, where conservatives lost control of our House and our Senate. And what did that look like for us? Some of our speakers have outlined that. First, liberals erased, and I would say it's 50 years of pro-life public policy. The lifetime work, it does include the 20 years I've been here that I saw these amazing things. They erased the informed consent for women. There's no real informed consent for women. They no longer have a right to see their ultrasound when they're considering an abortion. They no longer are assured that they're in a safe space, that at least if they're going to take the life of their unborn child, they're not going to risk their own. All that went away. But you know, there's another thing that went away that's 50 years old, long before I ever was here or got in the movement, which is that they actually erased the right of a woman to know that a doctor is going to do their abortion. That law was put into place in 1975, 2 years after Roe. That's how far back they worked, how quickly, with one bill, they erased all the pro-life gains. And you know what those pro-life gains have gotten us? A 41.5% drop in abortion in the last 7 years alone. That's what they undid. Next, they went after 20 years that the Family Foundation and conservative legislators like Delegate Cox have been working to block all the efforts to change our code by adding these categories of sexual orientation and gender identity into these non-discrimination statutes. So they passed this misnamed Virginia Values Act. Not my values, not your values. But they passed this law. It looks just like the Equality Act up at the federal level they're trying to get passed. That doesn't simply say that government can't make employment decisions about these things. Doesn't even simply say that retail business or businesses that are open to the public in a daily fashion, doesn't even just say that they can't consider these issues as they address their hiring. No, in fact, they didn't even just go after private companies that are just doing their day-to-day stuff. The target in this bill, who they included in this bill, churches and other faith-based entities like schools cannot hire and fire people whose lifestyles demonstrate that they don't believe in the tenets of those very same churches and schools. They left our children, some who may have unwanted same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria confusion, they left them without help because they banned counseling that provides any kind of restorative guidance. They also forced new transgender guidelines into schools to compel students and teachers to accept and teach views of sexuality and biology that conflict with their values and threaten privacy and safety of our young girls in the changing areas as they introduce the opposite sex. They increased your sales tax, other taxes. In fact, you might not have even noticed, it just went into effect this week in Central Virginia. We're now up at 6%. That might be news. You'll figure it out real quick if you actually still do business in Central Virginia, if you haven't run for the hills. And the newest thing, Delegate Cox mentioned it, the creation of a sex text hotline done by our governor, by his Department of Health. So postcards arriving in the mailboxes, soliciting your children, my children, your grandchildren, to say, oh, if you have any questions, don't go to your parents. Don't have those sensitive conversations with the people who care about you the most. Have those conversations over a device, over technology, with a perfect stranger. Oh, and by the way, we're going to make it look like it's the Department of Health, but actually we outsourced it to a third party, so it's not even approved by our government kinds of doctors, it's just whoever. That's the newest thing. The list goes on and on of what happens even after years and years of having conservative control and having good conservative gains, when you let the opposite ideology take over a House, a Senate, a governorship. We've seen it in our Commonwealth. Do we dare allow that to happen at the federal level? I really don't think a Biden White House, a Pelosi House of Representatives, and a Schumer Senate is going to be any better than a Northam mansion with a filler corn-led House and with a Senate run by Dick Saslaw. You're going to see it. What we've seen here, we cannot let happen at the federal level. So while this might seem like it's about political parties, because it all sounds like that, I can assure you that many of the pro-life gains that we made over the year were actually made with pro-life Democrats. For a long time, we had folks across the aisle that shared an understanding of human life. We still have maybe one left in the Senate. Got to have another one, or a lieutenant governor that breaks a tie in the direction of human life to block any continuing degradation of our pro-life laws. And that we have to wait till next November to work on. I would argue we start working the day after this election for that vision. And the real problem is that, unfortunately, what we're finding is today, a lot of the elected Democrats, which may not be the same as the folks that you know in your neighborhood, but a lot of these elected Democrats, they feel beholden to pro-abortion forces. So let's take Abigail Spanberger, Congresswoman, for example, in the 7th District, where Nick is working. She plans, if you listen to her, she makes a big deal. Her commercials, if you're in the area, her commercials talk about how careful she is not to take corporate PAC money. And her impression she's trying to leave you is, I'm beholden to no one. I'm my own thinker. That's what she's trying to convey. But let's look at open secrets and look at her donors. It was already mentioned earlier today. Her top donor, #1 donor, Emily's List. If you don't know who Emily's List is, it's the biggest pro-abortion PAC out there. And let's just give you a size and scope of their influence. They've given double the amount of the next donor on the list. You don't think she's beholden? Every vote, pro-abortion. Who else is on our top 20? Well, VCU. Now, that wasn't the actual one that you really need to hear about, but I'm a little shocked to see our state-funded colleges on the top 20 list. But don't worry, they've given her less than they gave Biden and Bernie, actually. So if you're a VCU alum, maybe time to start chatting about where that goes. But no, what I was actually going to say is also in our top 20. So we got, Emily's List, we got VCU sliding in there. We also have the teachers union, the education unions. I don't think she's going to be a whole lot of help to President Trump trying to get us creative educational options with anything that the federal government can do on that front. Don't expect it when your top 20 donors is the union. I think you get my point. We have to have conservatives in the US Senate to confirm judicial nominations. We have to have conservatives. We have to have conservatives in the House of Representatives so that we don't have to live through another 4 years of an effort to delegitimize a Trump victory. I know you all laugh like I do every time they try to nail our president and say that he won't accept the election results. We've been watching the entire media and the entire left not accept the last ones, and they're worried about him accepting the next ones. And there's one more reason for you and I in this room that we need some conservative victories here in Virginia. Hope. We need hope. Many Virginians are losing hope. They think their state has turned a permanent blue, a deep shade of blue, the kind of blue you talk about when you talk about depression, that kind of blue. That's what they think. Your friends, your neighbors, people down the street, people you go to church with. This election is not just about what happens this year. It's about what happens next year. And I know you, like I do, you want a governor that is everything Governor Northam is not. We want a governor that does not allow children to be born and then let someone decide whether their life is worth keeping. We want a governor that doesn't think it's cool or funny to dress up like blackface and hang out with a dressed up like KKK. We don't think that's funny. We want a governor that doesn't shut down churches while allowing violent mobs and just ignoring them. We want a governor that doesn't send animated postcards to our kids telling them to text a perfect stranger about sex. Our vision of governor is a governor that leads with love for the most vulnerable, the unborn, the elderly, our friends and neighbors that are of a minority ethnicity, our teens. But most importantly, our vision is of a governor that sits ready to lead with his veto pen for every bad idea that shows up at his desk so we can stop the nonsense. If we don't win back a US Senate seat, a couple congressional seats, it's going to be very hard to convince our friends and neighbors that our vision of a governor is possible. So I'll conclude with this. How are we going to win in a month? So obviously it starts with your vote. I hope I don't have to say too much about that here. I will say this though, we're not typically a group that likes to early vote. That's not our thing. We actually believe in integrity of elections. But the reality is, this is a different kind of year. Different kind of laws. Seems like different kind of rules. Not even sure what the rules are some days, but I'll tell you this. I would highly encourage you to go and cast your vote in person at your registrar. If you're here, go to a registrar. And honestly, I would do it as soon as you can. You know who you're voting for. You've got election voter guides out there if there's any question on the 7th or the presidential. But don't let any craziness happen that week of election day. I don't know what coronavirus is going to look like. I don't know what anything is going to look like on the day of. Knock that important step out first. Then it starts with the votes of others. Don't think of yourself as responsible for just your vote. Think of yourself as on a team, trying to collect votes. Have you taken your small group to the registrar with you? You know, who's in your Bible study? Who's in your Sunday school class? Have you said, hey, after church, let's have a party, then Monday, let's go to the registrar's office? We need to be thinking about the votes around us, the conversations. And for a little while longer, we have time to help register some voters. You know, in the 7th district alone, we identified like 13,000 voters that should be conservative voters that should come out for a guy with a worldview like Nick Freitas, but they're not registered. They moved in the district, whatever it is. We've got a victory team that's been working on this, 10 Doors to Victory. We've got a program for your kids. If your kids are sitting home doing virtual school, get them out walking. We got gift cards. Go register 10 houses. We'll pay them, for heaven's sakes. We need those votes. Those folks are there. They're just not registered. We got time. We got a couple more Saturdays, today, next week. Get them registered. And then it's door knocking. You know, an article recently described door knocking as the gold standard. We actually have a huge advantage on this year. The other side, like, their ideology isn't going to let them knock doors. I mean, wow, if we don't take advantage of that, shame on us. At Family Foundation Action, partnering with Students for Life, our team has already knocked 40,000 doors, and we couldn't even start until after we got through the quarantine. That's 40,000 doors. Why don't you be part of that? And there's a specific way we can do that. We're knocking today. After this event, we will feed you pizza and we will put you at the doors. We have that ready, and what we're going to do after I'm done and Bishop Jackson hopefully has showed up and closed us out in prayer, Britton's going to come right back up here and she's going to train who's willing to do it. If you can't do it today, you can still get the training. We can send you a walkbook. Don't have to do it with us at this moment, but I'm telling you, get the training, set aside some hours. This is not undoable. This is not for somebody else. This is for all of us. Phone calls. Oh, heavens. Phone calls are easy. It's been made so easy. It's like they dial for you. You're listening to hold music, and you don't have to do anything until somebody picks up. I mean, you can fly through those. Hey, have you voted yet? To our conservative friends, we've got targeted lists. We can tell you who's going to vote our way. If you've done any kind of past voting, we have a good feel. Just call them up, make sure they've already gone. If we don't know, we've got a group of undecideds, let's have a conversation. We can do that, and it's easy. And you can do it from your home on your own cell phone. We'll hand you the list. And the list isn't like, we allow us to remember the phone trees, like we dial down, like you'd literally have no, you're not dialing any numbers, you're on an app. It's easy. Get your church involved. We've got a luncheon for pastors right after this. What is your pastor talking about from the pulpit? The issues? I hope so. They're biblical before they were ever political. What is he offering to shepherd the flock in this stewardship that we have as unique as our representative government is? We get a chance to be a part of that. What is your pastor doing to just say, hey, are you informed? Here's some voter guides. Hey, are you registered? Running out of Sundays for registration. He could be saying that now. Have you asked your pastor, are you willing to do this? I'll tell you, he'll do it more because you asked him than because I asked him. So what are our churches doing? We have voter guides available for these pastors. We have entire ways they could make sure their entire church is registered. Let's get our churches involved. I don't want to wake up November 4th or January, or whenever this thing gets decided, right? We don't know. But I don't want to wake up and think I could have done one more thing, because I'm looking at an outcome that just keeps getting more bleak. In Virginia, we have no excuse. No excuse. We've seen the 7th district flip from an uber-conservative Congressman Dave Bratt to Abigail Spanberger over basically 6,000 to 7,000 votes in a congressional district. That's a couple of churches getting their act together and getting it done. We've seen statewide races. Remember landslide Bob, we used to call Bob McDonnell, for a couple hundred votes, winning statewide? In the entire Commonwealth, it was like a couple hundred votes. We've seen House districts come down to literally less than 2 handfuls of votes. And we saw the entire control of the House of Delegates come down to a flip. One more voter in one district would have prevented the coin flip that had us all on edge to see if the Republicans would hold it for a little bit longer, to maybe keep holding up these pro-life victories for a little bit longer. We have no excuse to think that that one more thing we could do isn't going to make a difference. So seriously, folks, think for yourself, what is the one more thing that you could do? Where are those few more hours you could carve out to pick any one of these things to do? And let's go do them. Let's go do them.